Some scholars estimate that he lived around 750 BC, and that the father of Greek literature was from a place not far from Troy.
We think that he came from a region probably fairly close to Troy, perhaps from the city of Smyrna or from the island of Chios, but even this is doubtful. There's a strong tradition that he was blind, but other than that, virtually nothing can be said with any certainty about him.
Two of the greatest mysteries about Homer concern how someone who lived 500 years after the Trojan War can recall such graphic details of battle and bloodshed. And how could one person, before the invention of Greek writing, remember more than 16,000 lines from the Iliad and 12,000 lines from the Odyssey? One possible answer is that Homer is a descendant of a lineage of singer-storytellers. If this is true, it means that the Iliad and Odyssey were not written by a Homer, but were passed down by many Homers.
It's perfectly plausible that singers immediately began to sing about this famous conflict, that it was passed on from one generation to the next, not with any attention to historical accuracy, in which no one had any interest. All the details and all the fancy stuff, and the woman running away, and Achilles and Hector, and the Trojan horse, all this stuff was generated by singers over the ages. Their contributions to the story were inherited by Homer, and he added his own twist to it.
But if Homer is the last in a lineage of oral poets, how does the story of Troy transform from a memorized song to the first written story of Western civilization? In the 1930s, an American scholar by the name of Milman Parry, equipped with some of the first portable sound recording devices, discovers a way to return to a time when all of history was a song. Parry treks to old-world Balkan villages in Serbia and discovers singers who, just like Homer, sing epic songs of ancient battles and heroes.
Parry made recordings on aluminum discs and on aluminum wire of these songs, and he also took down these songs by dictation. Parry discovered a very interesting thing, that when you write down an oral poem, it tends to get much longer than when you just sing it in a public performance.
For over a year, Parry investigates the oral tradition, transcribing and recording many songs, some as long as Homer's. Parry finds that memory of historical events can be passed on for long periods of time and still remain accurate. The Serbian bards sing about the Battle of Kosovo, which had taken place in the 14th century. Amazingly, written accounts of heroes battling invaders confirm these 600-year-old songs to be true.
Is it plausible, therefore, that there really was a Trojan War, and that at least the fact of the war was passed down through oral tradition for 400 years or so until 800 BC, when Homer's poems were finally taken down? My own opinion is that this is plausible. There must, in fact, have been a Trojan War. Otherwise, why would anybody have sung about it in the first place?
Parry's work confirms that one person can not only memorize songs as long as the Iliad and Odyssey, but that the accounts can be historically true. For the first time, there is an understanding of how the story of Troy could survive 500 years until the time of Homer, and how Homer's greatness is born.
Homer must have been a very famous singer in his day. He must have been like the Rolling Stones. He was a very famous entertainer of some kind. It's plausible that his greatness as a poet, which is proven by the Iliad and the Odyssey, by his brilliant poems that have survived, did inspire somebody to record these stories. Indeed, the very man who invented the technological means that made the recording possible, that is, the Greek alphabet.
Before Homer, epic stories were memorized and sung. These oral tales were usually performed at the feasts of aristocrats and noblemen. But Homer's story of Troy was so powerful that someone wanted a way to record the words and teach them to others. The problem was the Greeks had no system of writing. So one theory is that this someone, the first Greek scribe, adapts the Phoenician writing system, adds vowels, and invents the Greek alphabet to record the words of Homer.
Here's an example based upon early epigraphic remains of what this text might have looked like. It begins on the right-hand side, back and forth, as the ox turns, the Greeks said, comparing this style of writing to the plowing of a field where you plow up one end and back the other and back again.
Now, with Homer singing to a scribe, these heroic stories of Troy, the first in Greek history to be written down, inspire a much greater audience.
In my opinion, is because they were the first texts that ever existed in the Greek vocal alphabet. And as such, they were used from the very beginning as the basis for instruction about how to use this writing system. And they never stopped being that. So when you went to school in ancient Greece, you studied the text of Homer, right back to the day that the man who invented the alphabet first wrote them down.
Homer's story of Troy becomes the tool by which language and literature are taught, the very foundation of Western civilization. For the next 3,000 years, his story of Troy will inspire the greatest Greek and Roman writers, Renaissance artists, Shakespeare, and even Hollywood films. But over the centuries, the true story of Troy is blurred by myth, and Troy the city, a ruin even at the time of Homer, is covered by the sands of time and lost. Then, in the 19th century, inspired by Homer's account of battle, blood, lust, and deceit, a rich adventurer goes in search of the treasures and the true story of Troy. July 6th, 1827. After centuries of Ottoman occupation, Greece wins its independence and emerges as a new nation. Europe is smitten with everything Greek, and Homer's Iliad and Odyssey ignite Trojan fever. With a pick in one hand and the Iliad in the other, a German-American self-made millionaire, Heinrich Schliemann, sets off to uncover Troy.
Heinrich Schliemann is actually a fascinating man. He's a Wall Street tycoon of the 19th century. He made a great deal of money speculating in Russia and in the United States, including the gold rush in California. Having made a great deal of money and therefore being able to retire from his business pursuits, he at this point can go and pursue what he claimed was a lifelong fixation with Greece and particularly with the Trojan War.
Heinrich Schliemann has a knack for finding gold. He is in California for the gold rush, makes millions in St. Petersburg under the Tsars. And in his search for profit and adventure, he dresses as a Bedouin, circumcises himself, and sneaks into Mecca. In 1868, he moves to Athens and launches a campaign throughout the Aegean in search of the legends of Homer and ultimately Troy.
Schliemann was not an archaeologist, but he had a sacred faith in Homer. I mean, Homer was his Bible. And this led him to discover things which nobody else had thought of discovering, of looking for, let's say.
Schliemann sets out to look for a place that matches the landscape described by Homer in the Iliad. A vast plain where two great armies can battle, near the Aegean Sea, between the Scamander and Simois rivers. A place with high fortified walls, from which the Trojans could watch in horror as their champion Hector is dragged behind the chariot of Achilles around the city. Elizabeth Reardon, architect for the excavations currently underway at Troy, retraces Schliemann's steps on the plains of modern Turkey.
Heinrich Schliemann was convinced that Homer was writing about a place that actually existed. And he was also convinced that this place here, known as Hisarlik, was where he was going to find Troy. He thought that if he excavated all the way down to bedrock, whatever it was he found at the bottom had to be the Troy that Homer had written about.
In 1870, Schliemann and his hundreds of workers plow through thousands of years of civilization, cutting trenches in the mound running north to south and east to west. The Trojan plain becomes littered with Schliemann's piles of what he considered rubble. He digs for years, but finds no evidence of Homer's Troy. He's getting desperate.
What he really needed was a big, splashy find. The man was very lucky because at the end of his third year of excavating, he made a find that fit that bill. He was investigating this very large fortification wall when they uncovered in a small pocket a treasure trove of gold objects. This was exactly the kind of find that he needed to get attention.
Golden cups and goblets, highly polished stones, and precious jewels. In 1873, Schliemann smuggles the treasure out of Turkey, dresses his wife in the jewels like Helen of Troy, and with Barnum-like showmanship, claims he has uncovered King Priam's treasure. He dazzles the world with headlines. Heinrich Schliemann discovers legendary Troy. False claims of Priam's treasure and accusations of stealing the site of Troy from Frank Calvert, Heinrich Schliemann convinces the world that Hisarlik is the site of Homer's Troy and that the Trojan War is real.
Schliemann was somebody who dedicated his life, his fortune, and his activities to proving Homer true. And this has my respect.
It's largely because of Schliemann that we're asking the question, was this war real? Today we still follow in that tradition in asking questions about the Trojan War.